What if I told you that the fourth Resident Evil movie involved destroying a $100,000 camera, riding Segways to film action scenes, and accidentally cast someone who played the exact same character he'd already played on TV? From pop stars playing zombies to knee injuries and cutting-edge NASA equipment, these are 20 weird facts about Resident Evil Afterlife that prove sometimes reality is stranger than fiction. Fact number 1. Milla Jovovich accidentally shot a $100,000 camera. Let's start with what might be the most expensive oopsie in the entire franchise. During one of the action sequences, Milla Jovovich was filming a scene that required her to fire her weapon at the camera for a dramatic point-of-view shot. But here's where things got expensive. They were using cutting-edge 3D cameras that cost exponentially more than traditional film equipment. Somehow during the take, a blank round or debris actually hit one of these cameras and completely destroyed it. We're talking about a piece of equipment worth over $100,000 just gone in an instant. Milla herself has joked about this incident in interviews, but at the time it was probably a lot less funny. Fact number 2, this was the first video game movie ever shot in 3D. Here's a piece of history that often gets overlooked. Afterlife wasn't just another sequel, it was actually a groundbreaking technical achievement. This was the very first live-action movie based on a video game to be filmed entirely in 3D. Not converted in post-production, but conceived and executed as a 3D film from day one. At the time, 3D was having a massive resurgence thanks to Avatar's success in 2009. Paul W.S. Anderson recognized that the Resident Evil franchise, with its horror elements and action sequences, would be perfect for stereoscopic 3D. This decision proved that video game adaptations could be at the forefront of cinema technology rather than just following trends. Fact number 3. James Cameron's Avatar technology was used. Speaking of Avatar, let's talk about the actual cameras used to film Afterlife. Paul W.S. Anderson didn't just decide to shoot in 3D with any equipment, he went straight for the gold standard, the fusion camera system that James Cameron had developed specifically for Avatar. This made Resident Evil Afterlife only the second film ever to use this revolutionary technology. James Cameron had spent years developing this camera system because traditional 3D filming created images that were uncomfortable to watch for extended periods. But these cameras were incredibly expensive, extremely complex, and there were only a handful in existence. For Anderson to get access to this technology so soon after Avatar was released was remarkable. Fact number 4. The crew spent 2 weeks just learning the cameras. Here's something that really puts the technical complexity into perspective. Before a single frame of the actual movie was shot, Anderson and his entire crew had to spend 2 solid weeks in pre-production doing nothing but learning how to operate the 3D camera system. 2 full weeks. In film production time, that's an eternity. The director of photography, the camera operators, even Anderson himself, they all had to essentially go back to school. Everything they knew about traditional cinematography had to be reconsidered for this new technology. In traditional 2D filmmaking, you're only worried about a flat frame. But with 3D, you have to think about depth planes and convergence points. Get it wrong, and you give your audience a headache. Fact number 5. It became the highest-grossing Canadian film ever. Let's talk about the film's financial success. Afterlife grossed approximately $300 million worldwide, which made it the highest-grossing Canadian film in history. While the Resident Evil movies are based on Japanese video games and star international actors, they're actually Canadian productions filmed primarily in Toronto. The record Afterlife broke, that belonged to Porky's from 1982, which had held the title for nearly 3 decades. A raunchy teen comedy from the early 80s held the crown until Zombies and Milla Jovovich came along. When a studio sees $300 million in global box office from a $60 million budget, that's the kind of return that gets sequels greenlit immediately. Fact number 6. A famous Japanese pop star played the first zombie. The opening sequence of Afterlife takes place in Tokyo, and it features one of the most memorable zombie transformations in the entire franchise. That first zombie, the J-pop girl who gets hit by a car and then stands up to reveal she's infected, that's not just some random actress, that's Mika Nakashima, one of Japan's most famous and successful pop singers. At the time of filming, Nakashima was a massive star in Japan with multiple #1 albums and sold-out arena tours. She was actually a big fan of the Resident Evil franchise and actively pursued the role when she heard they were filming in Tokyo. They even made sure her makeup was applied in a way that kept her recognizable, which is unusual for zombie extras. Fact number 7. Kmart doesn't say a single word in the entire film. Here's one of the strangest creative decisions in the entire franchise. Kmart, played by Spencer Locke, appears in Afterlife and doesn't speak a single line of dialogue. Not one word. If you watched Resident Evil Extinction, you'll remember that Kmart was actually a significant character with personality and character development. So what happened? When Afterlife was being written, Paul W.S. Anderson decided to focus the story almost entirely on Alice's search for Arcadia and her meeting with Chris Redfield and Claire. Kmart only appears very briefly at the end of the film, shown in her comatose state on the Arcadia ship. Spencer Locke was brought back specifically for these scenes, which were shot in just a day or two. Fact number 8. Wentworth Miller's first line was basically his prison break catchphrase. When Wentworth Miller was cast as Chris Redfield, he was at the height of his fame from the TV series Prison Break, where he played Michael Scofield, a genius who deliberately gets himself imprisoned to break his brother out. The character became iconic partly because of Miller's performance and Michael's tendency to have elaborate escape plans. So imagine the irony when Miller read the script for Afterlife and discovered that his character, Chris Redfield, is introduced as a prisoner locked in a glass cell in the maximum security area of the Arcadia. And his very first line, "I know a way out of here." Miller himself has joked about this in interviews, saying he was initially nervous that Chris would be too similar to Michael Scofield. Fact number 9. Ali Larter missed 7 episodes of Heroes to film this. Ali Larter's return as Claire Redfield was a big deal for the franchise, but here's what it cost her. Larter had to miss 7 full episodes of Heroes, the NBC superhero series where she played Nikki Sanders and Tracy Strauss, in order to accommodate the Afterlife shooting schedule. In television terms, that's nearly a third of a season. Why did she do it? According to interviews, Larter genuinely loved playing Claire Redfield and felt a loyalty to the Resident Evil franchise. She developed a real connection with the cast and crew during Extinction. The money probably didn't hurt either. Film roles typically pay better than television work. Fact number 10. The 3D effects cost 20% extra on top of the budget. Let's talk money. Resident Evil Afterlife had a production budget of $60 million, which was pretty reasonable for a franchise film with this much action and effects work. But here's the kicker. Filming in 3D added an extra 20% on top of that base budget. That's roughly $12 million spent exclusively on 3D photography and effects. Think about what that covered. The specialized cameras, the rental fees, the technical crew, the additional post-production time. It all adds up fast. This was in 2009 and 2010 when 3D technology was still relatively new and expensive. The film's $300 million worldwide gross meant the 3D investment paid off handsomely. Fact number 11. Boris Kodjoe dislocated his knee. Boris Kodjoe played Luther West, one of the survivors trapped on the Arcadia ship, and he took the physical demands of the role very seriously. In fact, Kodjoe spent 6 full weeks before filming doing intensive stunt training. He worked with stunt coordinators to learn fight choreography, weapons handling, and how to perform his own action sequences safely. Everything was going great until it wasn't. During one of the action sequences, Kodjoe dislocated his knee while performing a stunt. This is every action actor's nightmare. Fortunately, medical personnel were on set and immediately treated the injury. Kodjoe had to take time off to recover, but he was determined to come back and finish the film. Fact number 12. The title Afterlife was almost used for the previous film. The name Afterlife was actually the original working title planned for Resident Evil Extinction before they changed it. Back in May 2005, producers mentioned the possibility of following Extinction with a sequel entitled Afterlife, to be shot and set in Tokyo and Alaska. So the title existed years before this film went into production. When Anderson came back to write and direct the fourth film in 2008, he decided to recycle that unused title. It's actually pretty fitting considering the film deals with the Arcadia ship, promising a supposed afterlife or safe haven for survivors. The Tokyo and Alaska settings even made it into this version of the film. Fact number 13, Jensen Ackles was considered to play Leon Kennedy. Fan favorite character Leon Kennedy was originally intended to be in the film, and Jensen Ackles from Supernatural was even considered for the role. Back in September 2006, casting reports indicated that Ackles was being looked at to play Leon, which would have been a dream casting for many fans of both the games and the show. However, the character was ultimately dropped entirely from the script. Leon wouldn't appear in the film franchise until Resident Evil Retribution in 2012, where he was played by Johann Erb instead. With Chris Redfield being prioritized for this film as the main game character connection, and with an already crowded cast, something had to give. Fact number 14. The opening umbrella scene has hidden symbolism. In the opening Tokyo scene, everyone on the street is carrying umbrellas in the rain except for the zombie girl. This wasn't just a stylistic choice or a continuity error, it was intentional symbolism. Umbrella is, of course, the name of the evil corporation responsible for creating the T-virus that caused the zombie outbreak in the first place. The visual metaphor is pretty clever when you think about it. All the normal people are literally carrying umbrellas as protection from the rain, blissfully unaware that the Umbrella Corporation has already doomed them all. The one person not carrying an umbrella, she's already infected, already part of the outbreak. Fact number 15. They used NASA cameras to film slow motion scenes. The film used phantom high-speed cameras that were originally designed by NASA for recording space shuttle launches. These specialized cameras filmed at 200 frames per second for the slow motion bullet time and water sequences that became a signature of the film's visual style. Now, why would NASA cameras be needed for a zombie movie? Well, when you're trying to capture the exact moment a bullet passes through a drop of water, or when you want to show Alice's hair flowing in perfect slow motion as she spins through the air, you need equipment that can capture an insane amount of detail at incredibly high speeds. The Phantom cameras were built to record rocket engines firing and shuttles launching. Fact number 16. The cameras were too heavy for traditional equipment. The added size and weight of the 3D cameras meant the filmmakers were unable to use a Steadicam rig, which is the traditional way to get smooth, flowing camera movements in action films. These cameras were simply too massive and bulky for the operator to carry on their body, so the crew had to get creative with their solution. Instead of a Steadicam, the camera operator actually filmed the moving and tracking shots while riding on a Segway. Yes, you read that right, a Segway, but it actually worked brilliantly. The Segway's gyroscopic stabilization provided smooth gliding movements while supporting the weight of the heavy 3D rig. Fact number 17, principal photography took exactly 55 days. The entire film was shot over a period of exactly 55 days in Toronto from September to December 2009. That's an incredibly tight schedule for such an effects-heavy production, especially considering they were working with brand new 3D technology that the crew was still learning to use. To put this in perspective, most big-budget action films with extensive effects work shoot for 80 to 120 days or more. Avatar, which also used the Fusion camera system, had a shooting schedule that lasted nearly twice as long, but Afterlife had to make it work in less than 2 months of principal photography. Fact number 18. This is Chris Redfield's only appearance in the film series. The film marks the first and only time Chris Redfield, one of the main protagonists of the video games, appears in the entire 6-film franchise. Despite being a central character in the games and one of the most popular figures in the Resident Evil universe, Chris only shows up in this one movie and is completely absent from all the others. This is particularly strange when you consider that his sister Claire appears in multiple films, and other game characters like Jill Valentine, Leon Kennedy, and Ada Wong make appearances across several installments. Chris gets one film, and then he's gone. Wentworth Miller's performance was well received by fans, but when Resident Evil Retribution came around, Chris was nowhere to be found. Fact number 19. The studio wanted a darker ending than Anderson planned. Paul W.S. Anderson originally wanted the film to end on an optimistic note, with the survivors assembling on the Arcadia, finally finding the safe haven they've been searching for. It would have been a rare moment of hope in the franchise, with our heroes actually achieving their goal and getting a chance to rest. However, the studio had other ideas. They demanded a sequel hook, forcing Anderson to add the cliffhanger ending where a mind-controlled Jill Valentine suddenly attacks with an army of Umbrella soldiers. The studio wanted to ensure audiences would come back for another film. Anderson has talked about this in interviews, expressing some frustration with the decision. Fact number 20. It's the only film without Alice's trademark eye-opening shot. Afterlife is the only movie out of the first 5 films that doesn't include an extreme close-up of Alice's eye opening as she wakes up. This shot had become a signature of the series, appearing in the first 3 films as a recurring visual motif that signaled Alice regaining consciousness or starting a new chapter of her journey. The eye-opening shot was more than just a stylistic choice. It became a trademark that fans expected. It represented Alice waking up to a new nightmare, a reset, or a revelation about her situation. So why did Afterlife skip it? Some believe it was simply an oversight, while others think Paul W.S. Anderson intentionally broke from the formula. When the 5th film, Retribution, brought the shot back, it felt like a return to form. And there you have it. 20 weird facts about Resident Evil Afterlife that prove this film was just as wild behind the scenes as it was on screen. From destroyed cameras and Segway operators to pop star zombies and NASA technology, this production was full of surprises. If you enjoyed learning about the chaos that went into making this movie, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into your favorite films. Got any other Resident Evil movies you'd like me to cover? Drop a comment below and let me know. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.